There is a town in Arizona where the ground is sinking 6 inches every single year. Not eroding, sinking. The land itself is dropping because the water underneath it is being pumped out faster than anything puts it back. And as that water leaves, the earth caves in on the empty space. Long cracks are tearing across the roads, wells are going dry, and the people who own homes on top of that ground are mostly being told nothing at all. That town is real, it is on this list, and it is not even the worst one. Now let me be careful right up front, because the internet is full of people screaming that Arizona is about to turn to dust, and that is not what this is. Drying up does not mean the tap runs dry tomorrow. It does not mean a ghost town by Christmas. What it means is specific and it is measurable. In these places, the water underneath the ground is being drawn down year after year, faster than the desert can ever refill it. And every foot it drops does 2 things. It makes the water harder and more expensive to reach, and it quietly eats away at the one thing you cannot see in any listing: what the house is actually worth. Because here is the connection almost nobody makes. A home is only worth what the next person will pay for it. And the moment a buyer learns that the water under a town is disappearing, that buyer either walks away or offers a lot less. Multiply that across a whole community and you do not get a dramatic crash. You get something quieter and in some ways worse, a slow bleed in value that shows up in no headline until you try to sell. So this is 13 Arizona towns, or areas, where the water is measurably being drawn down, and where that decline is a real risk to what your home is worth over the next 10 to 20 years. And I promise you the same thing I always do. Every single one comes with the actual mechanism and the real number, because a warning with no evidence behind it is just noise, and this channel does not deal in noise. One rule before we count them down. Every place here still has people living good lives in it today, and most of them have real fixes being fought over right now. I am not telling you to run. I am telling you to ask the one question the brochure will never answer before you hand over the biggest check of your life. Let us start the countdown. Number 13, Buckeye. Buckeye, out on the far western edge of the Phoenix metro, is one of the fastest growing cities in the entire United States. Farmland turning into rooftops at a staggering pace. And on the surface, that looks like the opposite of a water problem. It looks like a boom. Here is the crack underneath it. In 2023, the state of Arizona ran the numbers on the groundwater in parts of the Phoenix area and found something that stopped the boom cold. There was not enough groundwater underground to guarantee 100 years of supply for all the new houses that developers wanted to build. So the state did something almost unheard of in the middle of a housing boom. It announced it would stop approving brand new subdivisions in these areas that depended on groundwater alone. Now think about what that does to value over time. It does not touch the homes already standing, but it puts a hard question mark over the long-term water future of the whole area, and a place whose growth is capped by water is a place where the story every buyer eventually hears is a nervous one. Buckeye is not drying up like a ghost town. It is running into a wall the state itself drew, and that wall is made of water.
Number 12, Queen Creek. Same story as Buckeye, on the opposite side of the valley. Queen Creek sits on the fast-growing southeastern edge of the metro, and it has been one of the hottest places to buy in Arizona for years. Beautiful new communities, young families, the whole dream. And it sits under the same shadow. Queen Creek draws heavily on groundwater, and it falls inside the same state findings that showed the Phoenix area does not have enough groundwater underground to promise 100 years of supply for unlimited new building. The town has been scrambling to lock down other sources of water, spending real money to import supply from elsewhere, precisely because its leaders can see the groundwater math does not work on its own. That effort is genuinely to their credit, but you as a buyer need to read what it means. When a town is spending heavily to go find water somewhere else, that is not a town swimming in it. That is a town that already knows the well under its feet has a bottom. The homes are lovely. Just make sure you understand what is paying for the water that comes out of the tap,
and what happens to that arrangement in 20 years. Number 11, Casa Grande. Now we move south into Pinal County, and this is where the Arizona groundwater story gets genuinely serious, because Pinal County is the clearest example in the whole state of the math simply not adding up. Casa Grande sits in the heart of it. For years, this was farm country running almost entirely on pumped groundwater, and then the houses came. Tens of thousands of them, drawn by cheap land between Phoenix and Tucson. Here is the problem. The state's own groundwater model for the Pinal area found that there was not enough water underground to meet everything that had been promised. Not enough for the farms, and the existing plans, and the future growth all at once. That finding was so stark it made national news, and it forced a hard reckoning about how much more could ever be built there. For a homeowner, this is the mechanism laid bare. When the official projection for your basin says the demand is bigger than the supply, every future buyer is stepping into that same equation. Casa Grande has real advantages, real jobs coming in, real location, but the water underneath Pinal County is spoken for more heavily than it can deliver, and that is a fact that sits under every home value in the area. Number 10, Coolidge and Eloy. These two Pinal County towns are Casa Grande's neighbors, and they are on this list for the same reason, only more so, because they are smaller and lean even harder on that same overpromised groundwater. Coolidge has seen enormous new housing development dropped onto old farmland, the classic Pinal pattern, rooftops where there used to be cotton and alfalfa, all of it drinking from the same stressed aquifer. Eloy sits in the same squeeze. Neither town has a big river or a major imported supply riding to the rescue. They depend on the ground, and the ground in Pinal County is exactly where the state found the shortfall. The honest read is this. In a wet future with expensive imported water, these towns adapt and survive. In a dry one, they are among the most exposed in the state because they have the least backup. That range of outcomes is the definition of a value risk. You are not buying a certainty. You are buying a bet on which water future actually arrives, and the price today does not reflect that bet at all. Number 9, Maricopa. The city of Maricopa, also in Pinal County, carries the same groundwater risk as its neighbors, sitting on the same overpromised aquifer that the state flagged. But Maricopa earns its own spot because it stacks a second problem on top of the water one, and stacked problems are what a cooling market punishes hardest. That second problem is access. Almost the entire city funnels out to the Phoenix Metro on essentially one road. When that road has a serious accident, the town is cut off. So a buyer looking hard at Maricopa eventually finds two separate question marks. Can I count on the water in 20 years? And can I count on getting out of here every single day? Either one alone caps how much people will pay. Together, they put a real ceiling on the town's value in any future where money gets tight. The homes are affordable for a reason, and part of that reason is underground. Number 8, Prescott and Prescott Valley. Now we go up north, and this one surprises people because Prescott is cooler, greener, higher up, and feels like the opposite of a water worry. That feeling is exactly the trap. Prescott sits in its own regulated water area, and for years that area has been in what water managers call overdraft. That is the technical word for taking more groundwater out than nature puts back, year after year. The region has been fighting for a long time over a plan to pipe in water from a distant groundwater basin to keep growing. And that fight tells you everything. You do not go to war over an expensive, faraway pipeline if the water under your own feet is plentiful. You do it because it is running short. For a homeowner in that high country, the beauty is real, and the overdraft is also real, both at once. The value question is simply whether the long-term supply gets solved before the shortage becomes something every buyer knows about. Right now, most do not. That gap between what the water managers know and what the market has priced in is precisely where the risk lives. If this is useful so far, a quick like genuinely pushes it to the people who need it. which is anyone about to buy a home in this state. That is the only reason I bring it up. Number 7. Kingman. Out in the northwest, Kingman sits on a rural groundwater basin with very little of the protection that the big city areas have. Out here, in broad terms, if you can drill, you can pump. And for a long time, that is exactly what happened, with large agricultural operations moving in to draw heavily on the same water the town depends on. The pattern is one you have now seen several times on this list. Unregulated or lightly regulated basin, big agricultural pumping, a water table with nothing serious stopping its decline. Kingman has real strengths, a good position near Las Vegas and the river and the canyon, and genuine elevation relief. But the water underneath it is drawn from a shared pool that has been pumped hard with little oversight, and that is a slow-moving risk that follows the home values, not the postcards. Number 6. Wenden and Salome. Now we get to a story that made people across the country genuinely angry, and it is the clearest picture of the whole problem you will find anywhere in Arizona. Out in the rural west of the state, in the Rio Plain and the valleys near these small towns, the groundwater was unregulated and the land was cheap. So large agricultural operations moved in, including foreign-owned ones, and planted some of the thirstiest crops on earth. Alfalfa mainly, specifically to ship overseas to feed animals in countries that had already restricted that kind of water use at home. They drilled deep industrial wells and pumped on a scale no household could match. And the households nearby watched their own wells go dry. There's a couple near Salome who drilled a well for $10,000, then had to drill a deeper one for $15,000 when the ground shifted, and then last year that one ran dry too. That is not a statistic. That is a retired couple paying $25,000 to chase water down into the ground and losing the race anyway, because industrial wells next door were pulling the table down faster than they ever could. It became such a scandal that the state attorney general sued the farm, and regulators finally moved to put the whole basin under management. This is not a prediction. It already happened to real people out there right now. But here is the part that matters for value. Canceling a lease does not put the water back. The water table that was drained is still drained, and the land in some of these basins is measurably sinking from it. If you are looking at cheap rural property anywhere in western Arizona, this is the cautionary tale you need to have in your head before you sign. The water can be gone before you ever arrive, and no listing is required to tell you. Number 5. Bowie and San Simon. Down in the southeastern corner near these tiny communities sits one of the most physically dramatic groundwater stories in the state, in the San Simon Valley. Decades of heavy pumping have not just lowered the water, they have caused the ground itself to crack and drop. This valley is famous among geologists for its earth fissures, long, open cracks that tear across the desert where the land has subsided from all the water pulled out from underneath it. For anyone considering rural land out there, drawn by some of the lowest prices in Arizona, the low price is the market telling you something true. When the ground is visibly fracturing from groundwater loss, that is about as clear a signal as the earth can give you that the water beneath it has been mined, not managed. Beautiful, wide open, and quietly compromised underground. Number 4. Sierra Vista. This one is the hardest on the whole list for me, because I have genuinely recommended Sierra Vista as a wonderful place to retire, and I stand by the life it offers. Mild climate, a hospital, real affordability. But honesty means telling you the whole picture, and the whole picture includes the San Pedro River. Sierra Vista sits beside the San Pedro, one of the last major free-flowing desert rivers in the southwest, and the community's groundwater pumping is directly connected to the flow of that river. For decades, there has been a serious, documented concern that the pumping to support the town and the nearby military base is drawing down the aquifer that feeds the San Pedro, threatening both the river and the long-term water security of the area. It is one of the most studied water conflicts in Arizona, and here's the part that should make any buyer sit up. In recent years, the water levels tied to that river have fallen below limits a court had set to protect it, and conservation groups have gone as far as formally warning federal housing officials that water for new homes and developments in the Sierra Vista area may no longer be legally available. Think about what that means. When people are writing to the government arguing that new homes in your town cannot legally get water,
That is no longer a distant environmental debate. That is a signal aimed straight at future home values. The town is not going dry tomorrow, and it remains a genuinely lovely place to live. But there is a real, unresolved question mark running right through the middle of it, and you deserve to know it is there. Number 3. Willcox. This is the town I opened with, the one where the ground sinks 6 inches a year, and now you get the full picture. Willcox sits on a groundwater basin that for most of its history nobody regulated at all. Large agricultural operations pumped it for decades, and the water table has been falling the entire time. Then, in 2025, satellite data made the consequence impossible to ignore. The land in the Willcox Basin is sinking by as much as 6 inches every year, the fastest rate anywhere in the state. Since the 1950s, parts of it have dropped by as much as 12 feet. 12 feet! The ground is caving as the water drains out from under it, opening those long fissures across roads and fields and drying up the domestic wells that families depend on. The state finally declared the basin a management area in 2024, which may slow the pumping going forward. But here is the hard truth. It does not lift the land back up, and it does not refill what was taken. That damage is permanent. For a home in that basin, you are looking at a well chasing a water table that keeps dropping, ground that can physically shift under a foundation, and a story that is spreading to every future buyer. Permanent groundwater damage is exactly the kind of thing that pulls a value down and does not let it recover. Number 2. Rio Verde foothills. If you want to know what the end of this road actually looks like, you do not have to imagine it. It already happened here. Rio Verde foothills, northeast of Scottsdale, was a community of expensive custom homes, mountain views, a median price around $825,000. And a lot of those homes had never been connected to any real water system. Water came by truck. Then, on the first day of January 2023, the city of Scottsdale, managing its own shortage on the Colorado River, stopped selling water to the haulers, and several hundred households turned on the tap and got nothing. What is a beautiful $800,000 home worth on the afternoon it has no water and no guaranteed way to get any? For a while, the answer was almost nothing. Sales froze, buyers vanished. It took a lawsuit and a new state law and most of a year of fighting before a reliable supply came back and values could even begin to recover. I put it near the very top not because it is the biggest town, but because it is the cleanest proof in modern Arizona history that a water problem you cannot see can erase enormous value almost overnight. It is the pattern every other place on this list is a slower, quieter version of. And number 1. The Wildcat parcel on the dirt road, anywhere in rural Arizona. I am ending on this instead of one more named town because it is the single most exposed thing you can buy in this entire state, and it does not have a name. It is a type of property, and it is for sale all across Arizona right now. Here is what it is. Out beyond the regulated areas, a big parcel gets split into 5 lots, because splitting it into 6 would trigger county review and hard questions about water. Then each of those 5 gets split again, and again, until something that looks exactly like a neighborhood has grown up, with houses and mailboxes and neighbors, but that nobody ever reviewed as a neighborhood. Nobody was ever required to prove the water underneath it could support all those homes. That is precisely what Rio Verde foothills was. And more of them are forming right now, in unregulated basins, some on the same overpumped, sinking ground we just walked through in Willcox and San Simon. This Wildcat parcel is the most exposed thing on the list, because it stacks every risk we have talked about into one property. No assured water supply, very likely a private well chasing a table that keeps dropping. Possibly ground that is compacting underneath it. And not one word of any of it required to be disclosed because there is no line on the form that asks the question. The listing says, "Beautiful custom home on acreage with mountain views." Every word is technically true, and the entire water risk is simply absent from the page. So how do you actually protect yourself? Because that is the whole point of this. Before you buy any rural Arizona property, you ask 5 questions, and you ask them in writing. 1. Is this land inside an official active management area? Yes or no? 2.
What groundwater basin am I in, and what has the water table done here over the last 20 years? 3. If there is a well, how deep is it? When was it drilled, and how deep is the water today? 4. Who else is pumping this same basin, especially any large agricultural operation? And 5. The one almost nobody thinks to ask. What is the actual plan if the water this home depends on stops? Because the people in Rio Verde could not answer that last question either. Right up until the morning the tap ran dry. Now step back and look at all 13, because there is a single thread running through every one of them. In each case, the water problem is invisible at the exact moment you would want to see it. It is not in the listing. It is not in the walkthrough. You cannot feel it standing in the driveway on a beautiful spring afternoon. It lives underground, and in state agency reports, and in satellite measurements of sinking land, none of which are ever handed to you across the closing table. That gap between what is measurably true underground and what the market has bothered to price in is the whole story of this video. And I want to be straight about something, because a few of these places, Sierra Vista most of all, are towns I have genuinely recommended and still believe in as places to live a good life. Recommending a town and warning about its water are not a contradiction. They are two halves of telling you the truth. A place can be wonderful today and still carry a real question about tomorrow, and you deserve both halves before you spend the biggest money of your life. So do not panic and do not fall in love without looking. Treat every low price in this state as a question rather than a gift. Ask what is under the ground, in writing, before you sign anything. Because the people who come out of this well are not the ones who found a town with no water risk, since in this state, that barely exists. They are the ones who found out exactly what the risk was while they still had the power to walk away. If this was useful, subscribe, because the next one is the practical companion to everything we have built here. The complete, honest checklist for buying a retirement home in Arizona. Every question from every one of these episodes, the water, the insurance, the value, the fear, gathered into one place, in the exact order you should ask them, so you never end up owning one of these problems by accident. That is where we go next. Bring everything you have learned,